We're going to kick off our first rapid fire session with one of our incredible customers, Spur Local. And I'm going to hand it over to Rob.
Thank you, Dana. Hey, Amanda. So
Hey.
in our next session here is kind of a new format we're playing with called our rapid fire fundraising tips. So we invited a couple of our customers just to talk throughout the day about real life fundraising tips related to Giving Tuesday and year-end fundraising. So I have the pleasure of having Amanda's presence here today in our rapid fire for our first one. So if everybody can just put in some love for Amanda over here. She's been such a great customer. It's been amazing just working with Amanda and her team over there at Spur Local. So please give her just a warm welcome if you can in the chat. So Amanda, in terms of our format today, is going to be something new for me. So hopefully this works. So we have about 15, 20 minutes just to go through our fireside chat conversation. I do have a few questions I want to ask you just to pull out some interesting insights that you can share with our audience today. But first, if you can just give us an intro of who you are and how did you get here?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, everyone. It's great to be here. I appreciate being invited to talk. My name is Amanda. I use she and they pronouns, and as it says on your great slide, I'm the Communications and Marketing Director at Spur Local. So we're a small nonprofit based here in DC that works with about 400 plus other small local organizations. A lot of what we do is providing capacity building as well as storytelling to uplift their work and kind of encourage community members in this area to connect with them and support. So this year and I think it's our 4th or 5th year running our Giving Tuesday campaign, but we work with about 250 local organizations that participate in our community campaign. And we are the campaign leader for this region with Giving Tuesday. So I'm really excited. We love partnering with CauseVox and also are all about sharing like actionable advice for small teams and budgets, including what we're hearing works for our partners on the ground. So excited to dive into your questions, Rob.
All right, thank you so much. So you all are over there at Spur Local work with just hundreds of small nonprofits. And I think a lot of our audience today also come from small nonprofits. And I think what's really interesting is with the topic today, it's really around how you can leverage Giving Tuesday, how you can be successful during year-end fundraising. So I'm kind of curious, based on kind of what you've seen and your experience so far, can you share a moment where a particular fundraising strategy really resonated with your audience during the year-end giving season? How did it change the way that some of those organizations connected with their donors?
Yeah. And I think, for us, it's always uplifting the strategy of peer-to-peer fundraising, which honestly has grown a lot since we started working with CauseVox specifically too, because you all make it really easy for peer fundraisers to get on the platform, and it's like super convenient for folks and it looks great design-wise. But I think when we talk about peer-to-peer, it helps resonate with people's audiences in 2 ways. So the first is that you, in order to launch a peer fundraising campaign, have to do a lot of internal prep work so that you really know who your kind of like super audience members are. So whether that's your super volunteers, your super advocates, just the people that you really think will be likely to fundraise for you. So on that level, even if all you're able to get to this year is doing the research and the prep work ahead of time so you can launch a peer campaign next year, that automatically already gives you like an entry point into who your audience is. So the more you know them, the better you know them, the more it's more effective that you can communicate and connect with them. I think when we see our organizations do peer-to-peer really successfully, it's when you get specific with your asks. So when you reach out to your peer fundraisers, you want to say something that you think they're likely to say yes to. So how they prefer to communicate, as Chris was just talking about, right? And also, the second is to remove as many pain points as possible. So for instance, we were just hearing from one of our organizations that do peer fundraising really well, Hope Connections for Cancer Support. And they say, can you manage the peer fundraiser pages for them so that all they've got to do is just like share a photo, share some language with you, and then share the link to it. And you're managing with them one-on-one. It's a great stewardship opportunity also. Sending calendar reminders just so that it pops up for people. And then if you're asking people, send a collaborator request. All they have to do is click yes. So I think that's when we see getting specific with your asks, why that person, and then removing the pain points that they might have. And I think for a lot of small orgs who may not be ready to get to a peer-to-peer level, what I suggest is usually something we call peer-to-peer light. So really getting people to share out about your campaign, because we're seeing, people trust when they hear from their friends and family, right? People want to be hearing from a bunch of different folks in their network a couple of times before they actually commit to donating to an organization. So getting people to just agree to share about your campaign is a great way to start building up the people in your audience and, setting some of that relationships up in the future. So we've seen this work two ways. The first is having materials really easily available to share with people. So that looks like, a one-pager, sample captions they can just copy paste on their social media. We've also heard from some folks, maybe this is not the best way to engage with your audience. Maybe this is not what your board members like to do. You've spent time creating a toolkit before. It hasn't really been successful. Then what we see is maybe adding something like a specific question prompt to get your board members or someone else, like a volunteer, to share their personal story of why they engage with your organization. So people love sharing about themselves. That is another potential way to connect it to your organization.
Yeah, I think that's amazing where it sounds like one of the most effective fundraising strategies for year-end Giving Tuesday is leveraging this idea of peer-to-peer fundraising. So that you can really rally your community, not just be donors, but you can actually get them to participate in fundraising. And one of the giving studies that we did last year called the CauseVox Giving Study just found that 73+% of folks actually want to actively participate in fundraising versus just being a passive donor. So really find that interesting. So it sounds like what you really suggest is that, okay, let's use a different fundraising technique called peer-to-peer fundraising where we leverage our community, and then let's provide them a roadmap as well as resources to follow in order to be successful. And let's get really specific so they take action, because these are folks that are not fundraisers like you and I or the folks on our summit today. They're just regular people. So they need a little bit more guidance in terms of how to get that started. So why do you think peer-to-peer fundraising is a great fundraising strategy for folks to take? How is it really different than, let's say, sending an email newsletter or just posting on social media? Why is peer-to-peer more effective in your opinion?
I mean, I think to exactly that point, it's like people want to feel like they're part of something. So a big thing with leveraging Giving Tuesday is always people are not necessarily going to give because it's Giving Tuesday, right? For most folks, especially if they're not in the nonprofit space, like it's kind of just another Tuesday. You know what I mean? So they're going to give because you're kind of tying Giving Tuesday's larger brand awareness into something that's like, hey, the whole community is doing this. The whole world is kind of doing this. So how can you really use this time to kind of get involved? So to your point, Rob, we that are yoga instructors. Could you even do a peer fundraising campaign like, hey, host a free yoga class and do it as a suggested donation basis, and then link to like a peer fundraising page that we've helped you create, right? So like getting really specific with that ask, giving people a chance to say, hey, here's something that I'm already able to do. Here's a story that I already have that I'm willing to tell. And really thinking about it from the perspective of like, what is, like you said, we're all regular people. What would get you to agree to do something? What would get you to share with your networks? So whether that looks like, if you're a volunteer with an organization, if you have a volunteer activity and the organization's taking like great photos of you, you'd be more willing to share that on your Instagram because that's what you want people to see. And you tie it to a story that relates to like why this organization matters to you. So I think the reason why we find it effective is because it just gives you an inroad to understanding who your audience is. And it's such a specific way to then get them to engage with you in a way that an email newsletter just opening it would not have done.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think that when organizations think about kind of social media, they think about like email newsletter, really that's just one story or one narrative being shared. And it's really much from the perspective of someone at the organization, the marketing person, the ED, kind of creating and crafting that perfect story. But I think one thing that's really interesting about peer-to-peer fundraising is there's mass customization and mass personalization of those stories. So instead of just having one story that you can share, your community, your board members, your volunteers are really customizing that story, making it personal to them. And when they share it with their audiences actually respond to that since it's a very personal story to that person. So I find it really interesting. It's kind of like this dynamic of really leveraging personalized storytelling and making it very authentic so that it gets viewed, it gets reactions, it gets donations. So I see that as a really powerful tool for a lot of us today. So, and one of the questions that a lot of folks that are new to peer-to-peer fundraising, especially for Giving Tuesday and your fundraising, they're going to ask, okay, well, Amanda, you said that, okay, we need to leverage our ambassadors, leverage kind of this core group of folks. Like, how do you actually find people to approach to do some type of peer-to-peer fundraising, to do some type of sharing, to do some type of activity?
Great question. I think so. Starting with seeing who currently is in your audience. If you've done Giving Tuesday before, who have kind of been the consistent Giving Tuesday donors over the years? Those would be a natural group of people to start researching, seeing what kinds of networks they're part of. The second is just honestly looking through your email list, looking through your social media list. Who are the people that are consistently engaging with you, liking your posts, opening all of your emails, clicking through to your emails. And then finally, in terms of donors, looking at your longtime donors, if you have recurring donors, looking at those folks. And then for volunteers, if you have super volunteers, people who've really engaged with you, a few times over the last year. I think normally we recommend looking at least a year out. Like you want an organization, you want a peer fundraiser who has known your organization for at least over a year. But that doesn't always have to be the rule, right? There are some people who have just gotten to know your organization, but are like super involved, like you've heard from them a couple times. So those are always good people. I think before reaching out, what you want to do is some version of prospect research to really see, in order for them to say yes, I think they want to feel like they're being set up to be successful for a peer fundraising campaign. Like neither of you want the situation where you've asked them, they've agreed, and they don't end up raising any money for your organization. So I think looking and seeing what are the networks they're part of. Are they part of a book club that maybe they can reach out to on Giving Tuesday? Are they part of some kind of sports league and things like that? So who are the natural people that they could then rope in? Are they working at a company that maybe does like holiday parties, and then they can talk about you guys, do a lunch and learn? So just seeing like who are the people that in their networks they would likely be reaching out to, and then therefore when you reach out, you have a very specific ask to say, hey, here's why we chose you. This is the impact that you can have on our organization, like doubling really what you've done for us in the past, saying a lot of thank yous for sure. And then really kind of getting into, we want to work with you. So you have a point person in our organization that will work with you to make this campaign something that's easy for you to do and that's successful.
Yeah, I really love kind of the idea of you presented, where what's really important in terms of recruiting and finding the right peer-to-peer fundraisers, people to approach, is high affinity to your organization. High affinity can be measured in different ways, right? So people that open up your emails all the time, or even just looking at your donor list, folks that have donated consistently. It doesn't really matter about how much it sounds. You're not really thinking about kind of wealth research or purpose or the ability to give. Is more about just a high affinity to the cause, high affinity to the organization and its programs. And so that's kind of what I'm taking from as a key insight here for our audience, to like just find the people that demonstrated that they're willing to participate or have a high chance to participate. And then from there, equipping them with some ideas, and not just saying, okay, go out there and fundraise with a peer-to-peer fundraising page. You got to make it easy, but also giving them some ideas in terms of what they can actually do and the next steps they can take to be successful. So that's really great. So I'm kind of curious. So now we talked about kind of great peer-to-peer fundraising strategy. We talked about kind of stories. Is there like one of your partner nonprofits that you work with? Like, did it really kind of blow it out? Is there one that really blew it out of the water when it comes to Giving Tuesday or year-end fundraising? We'd love to kind of just hear like a story from your perspective.
Honestly, there are a lot of them. I think that's why Giving Tuesday is one of the favorite parts of my work, just because there are so many organizations that get really creative with their storytelling and get really successful on Giving Tuesday. I have just a couple of like small little examples. So I'll say their campaign has made it really easy to connect with people. The first is an organization called Our Minds Matter, which is an organization that nurtures like a youth-led movement to prevent teen suicide. So last year I saw the use Giving Tuesday essentially to kick off a campaign towards end of year that they called 80,000 teens. Very easy to remember. Their goal was to just raise $80,000 to engage 80,000 teens for youth mental health. And I think the exciting thing about them is that they really focus on like every dollar makes a difference, because they're reaching a lot of young people. They have a teen advisory council who they used as their lead advocates and peer ambassadors. And so even just something like that, where it's like, okay, you're very clear on your audience, you immediately connect that with the story and the theme of your campaign, which we always suggest having, just so that you have some like angles and building blocks for your storytelling. that they were super successful, blew it out of the water last year. And then I'll say another story too, is an organization called Live It, Learn It. Also blew it out of the water. They provide experiential field trips for young people. And something that I really loved in their storytelling was they asked their audience a really simple question. They asked, what objects carry meaning for you? And so it's something that everyone as a question has an answer to, can relate to immediately. And then they tied this to their organization's mission, and they shared stories from their students about what objects their students found meaningful, and then tied this to the fundraising ask, which was support this organization so that they can provide materials to make their field trips engaging for their students. So just like really simple things like that, I think tying everything together is the big piece. So even with your peer fundraising, using those stories to really come back to like a larger coherent theme that you're really pushing, and then connecting that to why your organization's raising money, how it's going to be using that, any donations raised to make a bigger impact. I think those blow it out of the water for sure.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is that some of the most memorable and successful peer-to-peer fundraising campaigns, or even just Giving Tuesday or fundraising campaigns, all start with a very simple idea that the audience can really remember or participate in. So I think it's really valuable because, a lot of us as fundraisers, we kind of just gloss over that core piece of creating a narrative or an idea for your fundraising, where a lot of times it's just about, okay, let's just write a story, let's just send something out, let's just like blast something out, and let's hope for a return. Like, you'll get results that way by having a great story, but then when you have a really memorable campaign idea, I think that what makes it really interesting is that you actually differentiate yourself with your Giving Tuesday campaign or your fundraising away from kind of all this noise. So people actually remember it, they actually click on it, they actually open it, they actually take action. So having a strong idea, the idea will sell itself. So I think that's really important to remember for a lot of folks.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious. So when it comes to storytelling, we talk about kind of this personalized storytelling, online storytelling, all that stuff. So, how do you view that? What do you recommend to a lot of your partner nonprofits participating? Like, is it really about kind of this emotional connection? Is it really just about having a great idea? Like, what are some of the elements of a storytelling, and how can it really move donors?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things that I usually say to start with, because you can potentially end up with lots of different places, right? I think number one, show, not tell. I know that sounds like super simple, but I think it's very easy for us as organizations, especially when we're also the person grant writing or, like putting our annual reports together. Like there's sometimes habits that we fall into in terms of the ways that we talk about our organization. And I think when it comes to like breaking out of that mold a little bit to brainstorm new ideas for how you can talk about your work, showing, not telling is a really big one. So again, as a small example, one of our organizations called City Blossoms runs an end of year campaign, of which Giving Tuesday is like a mini campaign. And they call it something as simple as like a harvest campaign, because they specifically steward like kid-driven gardening spaces in the city. So even something as simple as that, just kind of like an emotion in some ways, can really help connect things. So it doesn't have to be like a whole big fancy story that you're trying to create. The second piece of advice I usually tell people is to kind of build an ideal audience or donor profile. I think usually on Giving Tuesday, we find a lot of organizations want to use it to find new donors. That itself takes a while, right? But the easiest way to kind of get started is just to see who is your ideal profile. How specific can you get with like, what are the things they're already paying attention to? What are some of the like cultural moments for them that you can leverage or use as inspiration, right? So I think as you get kind of more into the mindset of, who this audience is, what they're already listening to, you can also see other inspirations from, other channels and things like that they might be following. One, to surface maybe like any potential partnerships that you can use to kind of reach their networks that way. But two, also to just see like, what are people already engaging with? If you don't have the data yourself, you can see, for other accounts, other places people are engaging. What are the stories they're clicking? What are the undertones for those stories that they're then clicking on? So that's my second piece. And then the last is just to actually, and everyone can do this, I always do this with my partner who doesn't work in the same space that I do, show your stuff to someone who doesn't work in your organization. Because again, like you want your messaging to be immediately something that someone understands, because they're going to take they're going to scroll through pretty quick. There's going to be a lot of things for people to look at. So you want to try seeing what someone who doesn't do this work on a regular basis, how they understand your work. If they surface any things that are like, oh, is this what you mean? And you're like, actually, no, that's not what I meant. This is a really helpful way to just kind of see, will someone else get your copy that's not you?
Yeah, I love the idea of kind of this two-step process of, okay, like let's first think about our audience, our ideal donor, like who they are, so we can really create a great idea that really resonates with them. But also then we can think about, okay, how can we actually reach them in a way that makes sense? But then actually putting kind of what you learned through kind of this crucible of a review of a critique from a friend or from someone else. So I think that's really interesting where, a lot of times we get in our own heads. We look at the same document for too long, the same narrative for too long, and then like we actually just don't know like if this is going to resonate with our audiences. So that's a great tip. Okay, we just have a few minutes left, Amanda. So what I also want to do is I want to ask you a question. Okay, what are you all doing for Giving Tuesday, and how can other organizations find out about it? How can they really maybe take advantage of some of the resources that you have?
Yeah, so we are having a DMV-wide campaign for Giving Tuesday with 250 organizations. You can find us on givelocaltogether.org, hosted on CauseVox. It looks beautiful. On the day of, we're going to have a public leaderboard with power hours and lots of different incentives and prizes for folks to make it exciting on the day. And then in terms of the resources that we have, so you can see us at spurlocal.org. That's SPUR local.org. And we provide essentially capacity building resources for all nonprofits. We have an upcoming National Small Nonprofit Summit, for example, in April of next year, as well as year-round resources in kind of our learning portal. So you're always welcome to reach out to us. We are here to help small nonprofits, just like CauseVox.
All right, Amanda, thanks so much for the time. I think Spur Local's work is amazing. You help out just hundreds and hundreds of small, medium-sized nonprofits, and the resources are second to none. So for all of us in our audience today, and for the folks going to watch this video and get the slides and all that stuff, be sure to check out spurlocal.org. They have tons and tons of great resources, especially if you're interested in doing anything Giving Tuesday, you're in fundraising related. They are in the Giving Tuesday world. So you're not going to get any more better information than from Spur Local. So be sure to check it out. Thank you, Amanda,
Thanks
for
so
your time.
much, Rob.